Imagine spending the first 20 years of your life in just complete pitch black emotional isolation.
Like total absolute darkness.
Exactly. No love, no friends, no income, and absolutely no inherent sense of your own worth.
Yeah, and society looks at that kind of background and immediately slaps a label on it. They call it an unrecoverable tragedy.
Right, like a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
But today's deep dive is going to show you why that exact scenario, that absolute rock bottom despair, might actually be, well, the ultimate competitive advantage for helping other human beings.
It really completely inverts everything we are taught about trauma and utility. What we have in front of us today is a deeply personal, incredibly raw essay from an author who lived in that exact void.
Yeah, a literal void.
Right. We are looking at a life defined by intense pain that, rather than destroying the individual, actually became the blueprint for an incredibly potent weapon of empathy.
And for you listening right now, this is the core mission of our session today. This matters to you because we all have them, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We all have those past struggles, those epic failures, the periods of profound isolation or embarrassment that we usually just try to sweep under the rug.
Right, the stuff you hide.
I mean, think about it. When you're at a networking event or like a dinner party, what do you do with your darkest moments?
You bury them.
You bury them. You curate the timeline to only show the victories.
Because we treat our most painful experiences as liabilities. We view them as heavy baggage that, makes us too slow or too damaged to be of any real use to anyone else.
Yeah, damaged goods.
Exactly. But the text we are examining today challenges you to look at that baggage not as a weight holding you down, but as a highly specialized toolkit.
A toolkit. I love that.
It is a toolkit uniquely designed to help you navigate the world and genuinely, authentically connect with others who are suffering in the exact ways you once did.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the journey this author took to forge that toolkit is intense. I mean, we are starting right at the absolute lowest point.
The very bottom.
Yeah. The narrative begins with a 20-something who is completely, utterly isolated. The text describes them as terrified of people, crying, raging, and just completely lost.
But there's a catch, right?
Right. Yet amidst all of that chaos, they are desperately holding on to this almost irrational desire to live rightly and to somehow help others.
What's fascinating here is the juxtaposition. To be fundamentally terrified of the very species you are desperate to help.
It's almost a paradox.
It is, and consider the practical implications of that fear. Because this author was so paralyzed by intense social anxiety, they couldn't simply go out and find a mentor.
Yeah, they couldn't just network on LinkedIn.
Exactly. They couldn't walk into a therapist's office or sign up for a seminar on emotional intelligence or even lean on a supportive family network. They were cut off from all the traditional avenues of learning.
So they had to be completely self-taught.
Entirely. And when your only classroom is your own isolated mind, the only textbook available is your own lived experience.
Wow, yeah.
That required a process of painful self-examination that is honestly hard to overstate. To learn how to help others, they had to continuously reopen their own emotional wounds just to examine how those wounds functioned.
Which is like the total antithesis of modern self-help culture. Usually we get this glossy, cinematic montage of healing.
Oh, for sure. The Instagram version of healing.
Right. Someone looking thoughtfully out a window with a cup of matcha, writing in a leather-bound journal, and suddenly they are cured.
With the acoustic guitar playing in the background as the sun rises.
Yes. But the author makes it explicitly clear that this unearthing process was gritty. It was visceral.
It was the psychological equivalent of performing exploratory surgery on yourself without anesthesia.
Ugh, that's a brutal image, but it's so accurate.
You are digging into the darkest, most shameful parts of your psyche. You are looking at the times you were pathetic, the times you were helpless, the times you just wanted to give up.
And you are doing this not to wallow in self-pity, but to desperately try to understand the actual architecture of that despair.
Because if you can understand the architecture, you can dismantle it.
Exactly. Which leads to this massive breakthrough insight in the text. It's this realization the author has, and the quote is just staggering. They say, my past hides someone else's future.
It shifts the entire paradigm of what suffering actually is. It moves it from a solitary punishment to a shared human timeline.
Right. It means the pain, the absolute confusion, the feeling of drowning that the author felt years ago. It perfectly overlaps with what someone else out there in the world is feeling right now.
Yes.
It's almost like emotional cartography.
Yeah.
Imagine you get dropped into a terrifying, dark forest. You have no compass, no supplies,
Just completely stranded.
totally stranded. And you spend years stumbling around, getting scratched up by thorns, falling into ravines, enduring agonizing trial and error. But somehow, eventually, you map your way out.
And then what do you do?
Well, when you finally reach the edge of the woods, you don't burn the map because you hate the forest. You realize your agonizing trial and error is the exact blueprint the next lost traveler needs.
The map is invaluable because it is drawn with the ink of actual survival. It's not theoretical conjecture from someone, flying over the forest in a helicopter.
Right, the helicopter view is useless when you're in the thick of it. But wait, I'm struggling with this part, though. Reopening emotional wounds like that. Voluntarily going back into the darkest parts of your memory just to draw a map for someone else.
That sounds dangerous.
It does. For most people, that just invites the dark forest back in. How did the author face that trauma without being completely consumed by it again? Doesn't unearthing that level of despair just drag you back down to the bottom?
It is a massive psychological risk, absolutely. The distinguishing factor and how the author bypasses that trap of consumption lies entirely in their utility-driven motivation.
Utility-driven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you examine your trauma solely to ask, why did this happen to me? Why was I so unlucky? It becomes a black hole. It consumes you because there is rarely a satisfying answer to why me.
Right. There's no justice in that question.
Exactly. But the author wasn't looking at their trauma to find fairness. They were looking at it to ask, how can this precise feeling of worthlessness serve someone else?
Oh, wow. So changing the objective actually changes the nature of the memory itself.
It externalizes the pain. And because they traversed this specific dark forest and survived, they possess something incredibly rare when they encounter another suffering person.
Which is?
The ability to bypass cheap platitudes entirely. They can approach others with a profound, unshakable sense of, I understand.
That is so crucial. Because when you are in the depths of a depressive spiral, and someone says, everything happens for a reason or just look on the bright side, it isn't just unhelpful, it's actively enraging.
It feels like a complete dismissal of your reality. Platitudes are what people offer when they are uncomfortable with your pain and want to rush you back to a state of acceptable cheerfulness.
Yeah, they want you to smile so they feel better.
Right. But when the person sitting across from you has the dirt from the same dark forest under their fingernails, the shared resonance of the pain does all the heavy lifting. The guide can say, I know exactly how deep that ravine is because I spent 5 years trying to climb out of it.
That is powerful. But let's look at the logistical nightmare this author was facing. We have this person who has survived the dark forest. But the text reveals that they grew up completely devoid of love.
An absolute vacuum.
Right. No parental affection, no deep friendships. If you've never received love, how could you possibly offer it to someone you're trying to guide out of the darkness? I mean, you can't teach a language you've never heard spoken.
That is the ultimate paradox of their journey. They possessed the empathy of shared suffering, but completely lacked the vocabulary of healing.
So what do they do?
Well, the author recognized this deficit immediately, and their response wasn't to just throw their hands up. Instead, they embarked on an obsessive, almost clinical study of what love actually is.
The way the essay describes this study is fascinating. It was like watching an alien arrive on Earth and desperately try to decode this bizarre human concept.
Yeah, an anthropologist from another planet.
Exactly. They didn't just read one psychology book. They looked at religious doctrines, trying to understand the concept of agape, universal, unconditional love, love as a duty or a divine mandate.
They dove deep.
They dove into complex philosophical definitions too, dissecting the ethics of human relationships and the nature of philia, or deep friendship.
And they didn't stop at academic or religious texts either.
Right, they even studied pop culture representations of love, the worldly, messy, romantic, often totally irrational expressions found in movies and music.
They cast an incredibly wide net, analyzing love from theological, philosophical, and sociological angles. But the nuance we really must highlight here is their motivation for this massive research project.
Yeah, why do all that work?
They didn't do this primarily because they were hungry to be loved themselves. They did it out of a desperate, terrifying fear.
A fear of what?
They realized that without understanding the mechanics of love, their map out of the dark forest would be useless. They could never effectively guide anyone else.
Oh, I see. So even their study of love was rooted in this intense desire for utility. Like, how can I be a weapon for good if I don't understand the ammunition?
Precisely. And through this exhaustive study, filtered through their own agonizing self-reflection, they arrived at a grand, unifying discovery about the nature of love.
Which was?
The author realized that love is not a monolith. It is not a static emotion.
Right. It's not a one-size-fits-all t-shirt you just hand out to everyone who is sad.
It is incredibly dynamic. The core insight is that love has a specific, highly variable shape, and that shape must morph and adapt based entirely on what a specific person needs in one exact fleeting moment.
The customization of love, that is such a cool concept. The text lists these radically different forms, and they totally contradict each other if you look at them out of context.
Give us some examples.
Well, for some people, in a specific moment of crisis, love is verbal encouragement. It's the cheerleader saying, "You can do this. I believe in you."
Sure, the classic supportive friend.
But for someone else, or even that same person a day later, that exact same encouragement would feel like unbearable pressure. It would push them over the edge. For them, love is just sitting beside them in absolute silence.
Presence without demands. The willingness to share the heavy air of a room without forcing the other person to perform gratitude or progress.
Yes. And it gets wilder. Sometimes love is fiercely scolding someone. It's waking them up from a destructive spiral with harsh truth.
Tough love.
Exactly. Other times, it's highly physical. The text mentions literally dragging someone out of a toxic environment when they are too paralyzed to walk out themselves.
Wow.
It mentions giving a massage to ease physical tension that's blocking an emotional release, making steady eye contact to anchor someone having a panic attack, or simply breaking down and crying with them, sharing the physical act of weeping so they aren't doing it alone.
Let's view those actions through the lens of traditional professional consultation.
All right, let's do that.
If you go to a highly paid corporate therapist or an elite life coach, many of those actions look incredibly inefficient. They look useless on paper.
I mean, yeah.
Why sit in silence for an hour when you could be working through a cognitive behavioral worksheet? Why offer a massage or weep together instead of drafting a 5-step action plan?
Because you can't put sat in silence and cried on a corporate invoice. The optics are terrible.
They are, but to the person who is actually suffering, the person whose spirit is completely shattered, those highly customized, seemingly inefficient actions pierce infinitely deeper than a consulting session costing hundreds of thousands of yen.
So true.
The clinical approach often addresses the symptom with standardized tools. The customized shape of love addresses the soul with bespoke precision.
But here is where the books fail. The books only gave the author the vocabulary of love. The execution, the intuition to know exactly which shape to pull from the box cannot be learned from a textbook.
No, it can't. The intuition is forged only through the fires of the guide's own past pain.
Right.
The guide remembers what it felt like to desperately need silence when everyone around them was shouting well-meaning advice. They remember what it felt like to need a firm hand when everyone was offering pity. That lived memory is the only thing that teaches you how to read the room of someone else's despair.
Okay, but let's play this out in the real world. We've established that love is this highly customized, shape-shifting entity.
Yes.
But how do you actually know which shape to use? It's not like people walk up to you, hand you a menu, and say, "Hello, I require a stern scolding followed by 45 minutes of non-judgmental silence."
That would certainly make things easier.
Right. Usually people don't even know what they need themselves. If I misread someone and offer tough love when they are fundamentally broken, I could do massive damage.
Yeah.
How did the author figure out where a person's baseline was without getting it wrong?
This brings us to the author's incredibly perceptive method for diagnosing what they call the phase.
The phase. Let's dig into that.
The foundational premise here is that a person's stated problems, the actual words coming out of their mouth, almost never match their internal voids.
Here's where it gets really interesting. There is a massive mismatch. The examples from the source are universally recognizable.
Very relatable.
Think about how often someone says, "I just need more money. If I had funding or a raise, my entire life would be fixed." The author points out that what they often actually need is confidence.
Money is just a proxy.
Exactly. The money is just a proxy for security, respect, and self-worth. Or someone says, "I need a method. Give me the 10 steps to succeed in my career."
But what are they really asking for?
When you look deeper, they actually just want someone to validate them. They want someone to look them in the eye and say, "You're doing fine. You're on the right track."
We see this logistical camouflage constantly in modern society.
Logistical camouflage, that's a great term.
Why do people do this? because articulating your pain using the vocabulary of logistics, money, methods, schedules, business strategies is socially acceptable.
Yeah, nobody wants to look weak.
It feels much safer to say to a friend, I lack capital resources for my startup, than to say, I lack a fundamental sense of self-worth, and I am terrified I am unlovable.
Oh, man, yeah. The latter invites terrifying vulnerability. The former just invites a discussion about venture capital.
It is a defense mechanism, pure and simple.
Definitely.
But the author, having been entirely stripped of both resources and self-worth during their 20 years of isolation, can see right through that logistical camouflage. They aren't distracted by the request for money or methods. They are diagnosing the underlying phase the person is trapped in, the phase of fear, the phase of exhaustion, the phase of low self-esteem.
And if you don't diagnose that phase correctly, your help isn't just useless, it's actually destructive. There is this striking analogy in the text about giving advice that completely rewired how I think about helping people.
The running shoes.
Yes, the text explicitly says giving the right answer to someone in the wrong phase is like gifting a pair of running shoes to someone with a broken leg.
It is a devastatingly accurate metaphor for how most advice operates today.
Let's dissect why that analogy is so devastating. A pair of running shoes is objectively a fantastic gift.
Sure, high quality, useful.
Right. It's a tool for health, for speed, for forward momentum. The intention behind giving the shoes is probably pure. But if the person receiving them has a shattered femur, giving them running shoes isn't just unhelpful, it's practically an insult.
Why is it an insult?
Because it demands performance from a broken person. It shows a complete lack of understanding of their current reality. It essentially says, I see where you should be, but I completely refuse to see where you are.
That is the crucial distinction the text draws between empathy and information.
Right.
If we step back and look at the broader landscape of modern advice, we are absolutely drowning in information. We live in an era where people with information are ubiquitous. You can open your phone right now and find 1,000 incredibly articulate, successful people giving you the running shoes of success.
Oh my gosh, yes. The optimization gurus, the hustle culture influencers shouting at you to wake up at 4 a.m. and take a cold plunge.
They possess the right answers logistically. But people who can find the right answer for that specific individual in that specific emotional phase, those people are incredibly rare.
So rare.
The author is able to guide people not because they have special academic credentials or a massive stock portfolio that proves their superiority. They can guide people because they have stood in that exact place of wanting to die. They know exactly what a shattered femur feels like.
And because they know what it feels like, they possess a superpower that the optimization gurus almost never have. Immense, unshakable patience.
Patience is key.
The guide doesn't get frustrated when the person doesn't immediately stand up, put on the shoes, and run. They expect the regression. They know exactly where the twists, the turns, and the agonizing stumbling blocks are on this route. They know that healing isn't a straight line.
Empathy, in this operational context, isn't just feeling warm and fuzzy about someone's sadness. It is a highly strategic navigational tool. It is the radar that prevents you from handing running shoes to a trauma victim.
Which brings up a massive, glaring friction point in our culture.
Okay, let's hear it.
If we agree that this hard-won empathy and shared struggle are actually the most potent tools for helping others, why does society constantly insist that we need flashy credentials to speak up?
Yeah.
Why are we so obsessed with the running shoe salesman? This leads directly into the source's incredible critique of advice gatekeeping.
The societal gatekeeping of who is structurally allowed to offer help or even to speak on a topic.
Right. The text highlights this incredibly common refrain, which I call the 100 million fallacy. It's this pervasive cultural idea that says, don't give advice unless you've achieved the absolute pinnacle of success.
Don't speak on business unless you've made $100 million.
Exactly. Don't give relationship advice unless you've been perfectly happily married for 20 years.
Yeah.
Now, the text is intellectually honest here. It concedes that, yes, of course, experience in achieving a lofty goal carries weight. Results do build trust. We aren't saying expertise is a myth.
It isn't a rejection of competence. It is a rejection of the arbitrary thresholds we set for value.
But think about the logical extreme of that gatekeeping. If we fully accept the 100 million fallacy, then only the ultimate billionaires, the untouchable gurus, and the absolute perfectionists are ever allowed to speak.
Which leaves a lot of people out.
It creates a massive vacuum of mentorship. It completely silences the person who is just 2 steps ahead of you in the dark forest. And honestly, the person who is just 2 steps ahead usually has the freshest, most relatable, and most actionable advice.
That's a great point.
The billionaire forgot what the edge of the forest looks like 30 years ago.
Mhm.
They're managing hedge funds. They don't remember how to strike a match in the wind.
The proximity to the struggle is exactly what makes the advice actionable. And if we connect this to the bigger picture and analyze the psychology behind this gatekeeping, it is often perpetuated not by the truly successful, but by those who are terrified of their own vulnerability.
Oh, totally.
The text introduces a fascinating dichotomy here between a true achiever and a realist, or what we might colloquially call a dream killer.
The cynics, we all know them. We all have one in our family or friend group.
We do. A true achiever, according to the author's definition, operates from a place of profound memory. True achievers never mock dreamers, no matter how naive, clumsy, or under-resourced those dreamers might seem.
Why is that?
Because the achiever vividly remembers being a dreamer themselves. They remember the deep vulnerability of starting from zero. They remember the sting of their early, embarrassing failures. They hold a profound respect for their own past struggles. The text explicitly says they don't laugh at who they used to be.
That is such a powerful metric for character. Do you laugh at who you used to be? Because if you look back at your younger, struggling self and cringe with contempt, you're going to project that exact same contempt onto the person in front of you who is currently struggling.
Exactly. But if you respect your past self, if you honor the pain it took to get where you are, your default mode when encountering someone in the dark forest is to nurture their potential, not to crush it under the weight of your own superiority. You recognize the fragile beginnings of growth and protect them.
Contrast that deeply nurturing mindset with the realist.
Oh, the realist.
The text absolutely tears into the realist archetype. These are the people who love to play devil's advocate. They love to pour cold water on possibilities, usually under the guise of just being practical or protecting you from disappointment.
They disguise their cynicism as wisdom.
But the kicker is, if you look closely at their lives, they are almost always doing absolutely nothing to change their own circumstances.
Interesting.
They use realism as an impenetrable shield for their own inaction. If they can convince you that trying to start that business or heal that relationship or write that book is mathematically pointless, they validate their own cowardly decision not to try.
It is a profound defense mechanism. By gatekeeping advice and shutting down dreamers, the realist ensures the status quo is maintained. If no one around them grows, they don't have to confront their own stagnation. The takeaway for you listening right now is incredibly urgent. Never let a cynical realist silence the value of your ongoing journey. You do not need a multi-million-dollar exit to have life-saving value to someone who is currently bankrupt in spirit.
Your 2 clumsy steps of progress are a literal lifeline to the person who hasn't figured out how to take a single step yet.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the final and arguably most critical phase of this entire deep dive. We've established that your painful past has immense value. We've established that you shouldn't let cynical gatekeepers silence you.
Right.
But how do you actually execute this? How do you step out there and offer this value to the world without feeling like a complete imposter? This brings us to section 5, pricing your pain.
The transition from merely possessing a tool to actually utilizing it in the marketplace of human connection. This is where the philosophy meets harsh reality.
And the author starts this section with a massive warning about a psychological trap I think almost everyone listening has fallen into at least once. We'll call it the danger of the discount.
The danger of the discount. Let's unpack that.
When people have suffered for a long time, especially if they've felt worthless for decades like the author did, they develop a terrible, deeply ingrained reflex. They severely underestimate their own worth.
It becomes a default setting in their communication.
A total reflex. Now, the text clarifies beautifully that this isn't just about money. We aren't necessarily talking about charging an hourly consulting rate for your friendship or your advice.
Right, it's broader than that.
We are talking about the conversational, psychological reflex to preface your own story with minimizing language. It's when you say things like, well, this isn't a big deal, but, or, I don't really know what I'm talking about, but here's what helped me. Or, this is probably a stupid idea, but...
We need to spend time analyzing this because the physical and psychological cost of that minimizing language is devastating. Imposter syndrome drives this reflex.
Probably.
You're so terrified of being judged or of claiming authority you don't feel you've earned according to the gatekeepers that you verbally discount your own lived experience before you even share it.
Let's give a hypothetical scenario. Imagine you survived a brutal, toxic workplace environment. You spent years navigating a narcissistic boss, the gaslighting, the burnout, and you finally found a way to assert your boundaries and escape.
Very common scenario.
You have a detailed map of that specific dark forest. Now, a younger colleague comes to you, clearly drowning in the exact same dynamic. If you hand them your advice, but preface it with, I mean, I'm not an HR expert, maybe it was just me being sensitive, but what does that actually do?
It instantly degrades the authority of your survival. You are signaling to the listener that your experience, your pain, and your hard-won map are essentially unreliable. You are practically begging them not to take you seriously.
Exactly.
If you hand someone a map out of a burning building and say, this is probably entirely wrong and I'm not a firefighter, they aren't going to follow it. They're going to stay in the fire.
By trying to protect yourself from criticism, you are robbing the other person of the opportunity to truly benefit from your survival. You have to own the validity of your pain.
You must charge full price for your map, psychologically speaking. You survived. That is your credential.
So once we stop discounting ourselves, how do we actually find the people who need our specific map? The author makes an incredibly empowering point about the world we live in today.
The global niche.
Yes. Because we live in a borderless, digitally connected era, the concept of a niche has fundamentally changed. Even if your trauma, your specific flavor of despair, feels incredibly obscure. Say it's the trauma of failing out of a highly specific medical program, or the grief of losing a very specific type of relationship.
Something hyper-specific.
Right. Even if it doesn't resonate with anyone within a 5-mile radius of your physical house, it will resonate somewhere on a global scale.
It is the law of large numbers applied to human suffering. In a globally connected world, geographic isolation is no longer a barrier to emotional resonance.
There are 8 billion people on Earth. Someone, somewhere, is trapped in the exact same, uniquely shaped dark forest you just escaped from. You possess the ultimate global niche.
But that raises an obvious logistical question, doesn't it?
It does. You have this globally relevant value. Do you just sit in your room, recognize your own value, and wait for the universe to magically send someone to your door? Do you just manifest them?
The author shoots that passive, wishful thinking approach completely down. Recognizing your value is only the first step. They introduce the final, critical piece of the puzzle, strategy. Because value without strategy is entirely invisible.
Value without strategy is invisible. If you have the cure for a disease but keep it hidden in a drawer, it doesn't exist.
Right.
And to be clear, the strategy the text is talking about isn't some cheap, hacky marketing funnel. It's not about optimizing your SEO to monetize your trauma. It's about a state of mind. The author talks about keeping your antenna up.
The imagery of the antenna is vital. It implies a constant, quiet receptivity to the world around you. Strategy in this context is the continuous active observation of how to connect your hard-won value to those who desperately need it.
Like paying attention.
Exactly. Are you listening closely to the subtext of what your friends are saying? Are you paying attention to the unspoken anxiety of your colleagues? Are you sharing your story in spaces where lost travelers might be looking for a map?
And the most profound and frankly challenging part of the text is that the author insists you must keep this antenna up, even when you are still in the depths of your own despair.
That is exceptionally difficult. When you are suffering, your vision naturally tunnels. Pain is inherently selfish and isolating. You only see your own bleeding feet.
But the author argues that opportunities to help, to connect, to find purpose, do not arrive by pure random chance. They don't just fall out of the sky.
No, they don't.
They land on the person whose antenna is up, actively scanning the frequencies of the people around them, even when they themselves are hurting.
Which brings us to the final, sobering warning in the text. The myth of shortcuts.
Right. Everybody wants a shortcut.
When you are in pain, or when you are desperate to finally be of use to the world, you naturally want a shortcut. You want the life hack. You want to bypass the messy struggle and jump straight to the enlightened guru phase. But the author zeroes in on this immutable truth. There are no shortcuts.
None.
There is a very specific, arduous rut of suffering and effort that you must walk. You cannot teleport out of the beast forest.
The suffering is the curriculum. You cannot skip the classes and expect to graduate with the empathy required to help others.
Well said.
However, and this is where the empowerment lies. So what does this all mean? How you walk that inevitable path matters entirely. If you walk looking at the ground, consumed only by the dirt in your own misery, you only see the dirt. You suffer, and you gain nothing from the transaction but the suffering itself.
It is passive endurance.
But if you walk that exact same painful path with your antenna up, looking around, observing the terrain, observing the pitfalls, analyzing how you survived each agonizing day, you spot the unexpected next moves scattered along the path. You find the tools. You draw the map.
It is the profound difference between enduring pain passively and processing pain actively. Active processing transforms the wound into a weapon of healing.
It is just a phenomenal framework. To synthesize this entire journey we've been on today, we started with a young person paralyzed by absolute isolation, completely lacking a foundation of love or self-worth.
We watch them agonizingly open their own emotional wounds to study the architecture of despair.
We saw them meticulously learn the myriad, shape-shifting forms of love, realizing that true help isn't about giving the right answer, but correctly diagnosing the true phase of the person suffering.
We saw them reject the societal gatekeepers who demand flawless perfection before contribution, choosing instead the path of the true achiever who nurtures fragile potential.
And finally, we saw them realize how to strategically, unapologetically offer their hyper-niche pain to the world without ever discounting its value.
It is a masterclass in psychological alchemy, taking the heavy, crushing lead of despair and transmuting it into the gold of genuine human connection.
And to you, listening right now, we know it takes immense time and courage to truly believe that your darkest moments, the things you're most deeply ashamed of, are actually your greatest weapons. It flies in the face of everything polite society tells us.
It really does.
But the proof is there in the text, and it's there in the world. The proof is in the profound, unshakable empathy you can offer someone who is walking the path you just barely survived.
The standard hardware store of advice might be completely useless when it comes to true despair, but you are already carrying the most specialized tools inside you. And that leaves us with a lingering question to mull over as we close out today's session.
Yes, the final thought.
The author of this essay found their life's purpose by turning their deepest, darkest void into their greatest offering. If your past pain is, in fact, the ultimate textbook for someone else's future, who in your life right now is secretly waiting for the exact lesson you've been trying so hard to forget?
The map is already in your hands. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.